Hey everybody, today is December 4th, but you're probably not going to see this until December 5th. So consider this a December 5th video. And since it is December 5th and not December 20th or 25th, you still have time to go pick up some coffee from coffeebrandcoffee.com. And if you use the code hammertime, you can get 5% off your order. And before I begin, make sure to give this video a like, share, subscribe, hit the bell for notifications. That way you will be updated the moment I put out a video about World War III or the zombie apocalypse, because, you know, that could be the next video. One of my very intelligent viewers sent me an email that pointed me towards a link about Winnie the Pooh employing police forces around the world. And it came from a conservative site. And I don't know if you know this about me, but I rarely try to go to the conservative sites. There's plenty to debunk on both sides. My eyes are trained at these ones, so when they shine a light on something that they've previously tried to avoid shining a light on, I make sure to point it out, or it catches my eye. So, case in point, Beijing secretly set up more than 100 overseas police stations across the world to spy on, harass, and even repatriate Chinese citizens living in exile. They've been operating 48 additional police stations abroad since the group first revealed 54 stations in September. So, 102 right there. According to a new report, that's just the 102 that they're willing to admit to, you know. The stations are allegedly used to monitor, harass, and even repatriate Chinese citizens living in exile across the globe, Safeguard Defender alleges. Beijing has denied running such operations, with the Ministry of Foreign Affairs telling CNN that using this as a pretext to smear China is unacceptable. The new report comes as President Xi appears to be buckling under pressure of nationwide protests with possibly relaxation on his zero-virus policies. And I do have an update for that. About 2 hours ago, he just said that you can ride in public transportation without having to get a thingy stuck up your nose. A giant Q-tip to swab your brain. You no longer need that. Or the butt swab. They do a butt swab, too. They probably even do a spit swab. I don't know. China is a weird place. And they've allegedly set up more than 102 police stations to harass, repatriate with the help of... In an exclusive CNN report citing NGO Safeguard Defenders, Winnie the Pooh Land has been operating 40 additional police stations abroad since the group first revealed 54 stations in September. Beijing has denied running such operations, with the Ministry of Foreign Affairs telling CNN in November that using this as a pretext to smear Winnie the Pooh Land is unacceptable. It was claimed that the facilities are actually administrative hubs to help Chinese expatriates with the tasks like renewing their driver's license. The offices were also used to help during the virus, when many citizens were locked down in other countries and unable to renew their documentation. Right. The new report comes after alarming footage showed a man being wrestled out of his home by Chinese authorities in hazmat suits after he refused to be moved to a quarantine facility. I've seen lots of those. They make it sound like this only happened once. I've seen lots of those videos. This is despite Winnie the Pooh's authorities announcing a further easing of virus restrictions after the dictator Xi Jinping appeared to buckle under pressure of nationwide protests over his draconian zero-virus policy. Draconian. I'm going to use that for the thumbnail. The new report, Patrol and Persuade, focuses on the scale of the network and examines the role that joint policing initiatives between China and several European nations, including Italy, Croatia, Serbia, and Romania, CNN reported. It claimed that China had signed police patrol agreements with several nations between 2015 and 2019. And then, what happened in 2019? Yeah, wasn't there what was that thing? There was a virus with a 19. So all these people signed police and patrol agreements with this country, and then there was a thing that came out, and, what was it? It'll come to me. Italian police conducted multiple joint patrols with Chinese police between 2016 and 2018, not in 2019, in cities including Rome, Milan, Naples, according to the Safeguard Defenders report. There was evidence found that a video surveillance system was added to a Chinese residential area ostensibly to effectively deter crimes there. Monitor your citizenry. Get their routines down. According to the reported, it was determined that Italy had hosted 11 Chinese police stations, including in Venice and in Prato, near Florence. According to the report. Come on, Daily Mail. China also has joint police patrol agreements with Croatia and Serbia. They were created in 18 and 19. There's that number again. As part of the nation's increasing strategic footprint along the path of Xi's defining foreign policy, the report said. Unless given consent, undeclared consular activities outside of a nation's official diplomatic mission are highly unusual and illegal. And while China claims the offices were meant in part to help during the virus, the Safeguard Defenders report claims the hubs predate the pandemic by several years. 2015. The report has prompted investigations in at least 13 different countries so far. Ireland has shut down the Chinese police station found on its territory, CNN reported. And there are probes underway in the Netherlands and in Spain. Another new claim made in the reports is that Chinese citizen was coerced into returning home by officials working undercover in a Chinese overseas police station outside of Paris, along with 2 other Chinese exiles who had been forcibly returned from Europe, one in Serbia and the other in Spain. I'm just gonna, look at that picture. You see this? They're getting a nucleic acid test to a resident, so they're getting a mouth swab now. Safeguard Defenders discovered the police networks while trying to assess the scale of China's effort to persuade some of its people to return to China, some against their will. What we see coming from China is increasing attempts to crack down on dissent everywhere in the world, to threaten people, harass people, make sure that they are fearful enough so that they remain silent or else face being returned to China against their will. Safeguard Defenders campaign director Laura Harth said, "It will start with phone calls. They might start to intimidate your relatives back in China, to threaten you, do everything really to coax the targets abroad to come back. If that doesn't work, they will use covert agents abroad. They will send them from Beijing and use methods such as luring and entrapment," Harth added. Last month, FBI Director Christopher Wray, piece of work, told a Homeland Security committee, "It is outrageous to think that the Chinese police would attempt to set up shop, in New York. Let's say without proper coordination. It violates sovereignty and circumvents standard judicial and law enforcement cooperation processes," he said. Harth told CNN that the group expects to find more stations in the future. "It's the tip of the iceberg," she said. "China is not hiding what it is doing. They expressly say that they are going to expand these operations, so let's take that seriously. This is a moment when countries have to consider that it's a question of upholding the rule of law and human rights in their countries as much for people from China as for everyone else in the world," she said. Meanwhile, back in China, President Xi, dictator, appears to be buckling under the pressure of nationwide protests under his draconian zero virus policies, with Beijing signaling it will finally relax the country's strict approach to the virus. You can now commute. And they are really trying to drive up the fear. The violent protests that have swept across the country to cities including Beijing, Shanghai, Wuhan, and Guangzhou mark some of the most extreme displays of dissent China has seen in more than 30 years. The demands of the demonstrators are now going far beyond calls for the end of mass lockdowns and constant virus testing. Some are calling for the end of Xi's rule. Faced with a level of dissent that Xi has never seen in his 10 years of rule, his authorities have signaled they will relax the draconian zero-virus policies. Speaking at National Health Commission Wednesday, Vice Premier Sun Chanlan said the Omicron variant was weakening and vaccination rates were improving, according to the state-run Zhanhao news agency. Despite this, horrifying footage captured a man being wrestled out of his home by Chinese authorities in hazmat suits after he refused to be moved to a quarantine facility. The man is violently dragged from his sofa in his home in Hangzhou, the capital of China's Zhejiang province in the east of the country, as he lies covered in blankets. The officials dressed in white hazmat suits appeared to have entered his home demanding that he be taken to a Chinese quarantine facility. The alarming scenes come as Chinese authorities announced a further easing... I'm not showing that. I'm not showing that video. Announced a further easing of virus restrictions as forecast showed the loosened curbs could yield more than 2 million deaths and 233 million infections. But the video shows that authorities in the country are still enforcing strict and brutal measures to prevent the spreading of the virus. The two men scream at the man, put the mask on, as they urge him to cover his face despite being in his own home and not posing a risk to anyone. Wrapping their hands around him as the man struggles to escape, the me yell at him to cooperate. Come on, editor. Where are you? The me yell at him to cooperate. The men yell at him to cooperate. Good job, Daily Mail. The distressed man then continues to wriggle his way out with the authorities, now clamping onto his wrists and legs. He also clings onto the sofa, not wanting to be dragged away and taken to the government quarantine facility. They did that in, what was that country? They had all sorts of little camps where they threw people. I know they did one in Australia recently, but there was another one. It was back in, the 1940s? I don't know. Don't push me, he says. Are you crazy? Eventually, the two authorities in hazmat suits pulled the man up from his sofa with them wrapping their arms around him and forcing him to give in. The violent protests that have swept across the country to cities including Beijing, Shanghai, Wuhan, and Zhengzhou mark some of the most extreme displays of dissent China has seen in more than 30 years. The demands of the demonstrators are now going far beyond calls for the end of the mass lockdowns and constant virus testing. Some are calling for the end of Xi's rule. See, that was up there too. See, I don't even know why I have to read the whole article if you're going to repeat it 3 times. Is there going to be something new here that you haven't said before? The protests that have spread across China are most since... Oh, they did mention it! They mentioned Tiananmen Square! No kidding! When hundreds, if not thousands, of Chinese protesters were killed by soldiers. That was in '89. There have been violent protests in China before, but these demonstrations, which have extended from Beijing to Shanghai, are different because they are spontaneous, nationwide, and directed at the central government. And despite the brutal Beijing crackdown on protesters, with riot police arresting the demonstrators before dragging them away to unknown locations, hundreds are still defiantly turning out onto the streets and fighting back. The protests mark the most overt threat against Xi's rule and his brutal communist regime since he took power 10 years ago. While the protests began following an apartment fire which killed 10 people that were under strict lockdown, now it's strict lockdown. They were under a mild lockdown before. Demonstrators are now calling for the end of his rule. There are other reports where they do not use the word strict lockdown, is all I'm saying. They were under a lockdown, but it wasn't a super strict lockdown. I've also seen bars welded onto people's doors so that they could not be opened by the people that were locked inside. The Chinese people no longer feel the party is out for their benefit, experts have said. You needed experts for that. And now Chinese officials have begun relaxing their virus policies, their zero virus policies, following the protests that have swept across the country. Southern manufacturing hub. The Southern manufacturing hub, now I can't say it, Zhengzhou, the site of dramatic Tuesday night clashes between police and protesters, said it had partially lifted a weeks-long lockdown despite seeing record virus cases. Protesters in the city had screamed as they threw glass bottles at scores of cowering hazmat-clad riot police. Hundreds of police were seen wearing hazmat suits for the first time, advanced towards protesters before dragging them away to unknown locations. Officials on Wednesday eased restrictions to varying degrees in all of the city's 11 districts, including Hangzhou, where recent protests took place. With the exception of a number of designated high-risk neighborhoods, the Guangzhou Health Commission said, the risk will be managed as low-risk areas. The central city of... I'm done with this. Scope of the protests from elite universities to Chinese cities to Wuhan and Chengdu is notable. Willie Wo-Lap Lam, senior fellow at the Jamestown Foundation Defense Policy think tank, said, Whew. The scope of the protests is notable. Willie Wo-Lap Lam. The protests are particularly worrying for Xi because they are against the backdrop of a slowing economy and high unemployment, which is going to be even worse now that Apple, Tim Cook, is deciding to remove iPhone City from China to India or Thailand or Taiwan. I think it was Taiwan. And many of those who have been protesting are members of the educated urban middle class from the ethnic Han majority. The ruling party relies on that group to abide by an unwritten post-Tiananmen agreement to accept autocratic rule in exchange for a better quality of life. Oh, so everyone is equal, but some people are more equal than others, and don't you want to be part of the more equal than others group? If you just go along with everything we say, you'll just be more equal than people. Just, go read Animal Farm. Now it appears that old arrangement has ended as the party enforces control at the expense of the economy, said Hung Ho Fung of Johns Hopkins University. I almost feel, if these people are real people, wow, man. The party and the people are trying to seek a new equilibrium, he said. There will be some instability in the process. While united against China's stifling zero-virus measures, a number of Chinese people have spoken of a yearning for broader political freedoms, 33 years after students occupied China's Tiananmen Square. Considering herself part of a small liberal bubble in Shanghai, China's most cosmopolitan city, Yang did not imagine so many people sharing her frustrations in a country that has grown increasingly authoritarian. This is the first time in my life I've done something like this, she said. Wait, she outed herself? You're gonna get locked up, little girl. This is the first time in my life I've done something like this, she said. In my heart, I've murmured such things 1,000 times. But hearing these slogans suddenly chanted by so many real people was exciting and shocking for me. For many in other cities, the virus lockdowns have exacerbated a sense of powerlessness. The protests are happening because under the virus prevention measures, people can't satisfy their fundamental needs to survive, said Jay Yan, who took part in a demonstration in Zhengzhou, a southern city with some of China's highest recent infection numbers. Thank you for joining me on the news. If you watched this far and didn't like the video, thank you for watching. If you did like it, thank you for watching and also liking it. I guess that's it. I'm done.